Yeah. So into the chat, talking about the 3-6 and some of the games they think. Garrett, I want your opinion on this since you are decked out in purple and gold today. But Show Memo says, I just know as a Tiger fan, we want Texas. We still have Arky and who knows the third, so Arkansas. So Arkansas, Texas for LSU, and I would think A&M would be the third. Who would you want to see as your three in that as an LSU fan?
I definitely want to
You're not on yet.
I definitely want to see Alabama.
Nope, still not on.
Still not on.
Garrett's still working out the kinks a little bit.
Yeah.
He doesn't get to get this mic
why.
time all that often. Oh, you have to plug in the microphone.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go, yeah.
So the three, definitely want to see Bama. I would like to see Texas A&M and Florida. Those are the three I would like to see every year.
It seems to me, and people, outside the Southeast may not realize how much Florida and LSU straight up hate each other.
I cannot stand Florida.
Yeah.
I despise
It's
it.
easy. I mean, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, they straight up hate each other. And that shoe game a couple years ago cost Florida a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, it essentially cost Dan Mullen his job at Florida eventually.
That was probably one of the greatest things to happen to LSU all season long.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I don't know. What do you think about that pod for LSU? I like that.
What'd you
one.
say again? You said A&M, Florida.
A&M, Florida, and Alabama.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't think they need to force LSU Texas. I mean, I know Texas would probably love that, but then again, I mean, they should have Oklahoma, A&M, Arkansas.
They get them every other year.
I mean, so it's, but I mean, as far as a permanent opponent, I'm sure that Texas would love to have LSU as a permanent opponent, and for certain reasons, I'm sure they would love to become a bigger LSU rival than A&M is, and that kind of a deal. But I don't think you need to force that one. A&M's already kind of got that. I mean, they intentionally set those two teams up to become a rivalry pre-OU and Texas. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain teams that are going to have 4 or 5 good candidates, and there's going to be some that have, maybe 2. But I think that sounds like a good little plan for LSU as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I'm A&M, I'm saying, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, or Texas, LSU, and Arkansas, maybe. But that's 4 candidates. Like, you can switch it. Yeah, so Texas, LSU, and Arkansas, to me, would be the best for A&M.
Who's Oklahoma playing? They're playing Texas. They're playing Arkansas because they're next to each other, I guess.
Yeah.
And they wear similar colors. I mean, is that the reason for the rival? I mean, I know there's some history there, but it's not like there's Oklahoma-Texas history or Arkansas-Texas history. So, yeah, I'm curious who Oklahoma fans out there would want to see outside of Texas because there's not, to me, just a natural – like, oh, that's perfect. Like, we just rattled off 3 for A&M. We can rattle off 3 for
Well, and there's going to wind up being some random ones like Oklahoma, South Carolina. I mean, it's not going to be that. But, there's going to be some because you can't make it all work.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, somebody's not going to have, the perfect setup necessarily because you can only do it so many different types of ways. So, yeah, I'm curious to see who Oklahoma's other 2 would potentially be. And that's why you can have this conversation. But if you do the one model, then you're like, who's your one opponent? Well, that just leaves so much on the table. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And I understand that, like Zach Barnett said, it's to boost the teams at the bottom of the standings and help get them bowl eligible, basically. Right? That's basically the reasoning. You're worried about what Kentucky and Vanderbilt and those schools will have to deal with. But I don't know, man. I think you need to be more worried about, and I understand why. I'm certainly not going to suddenly become elitist guy and I'll screw what the little teams think. But, I think it's more important to make sure you have the biggest, baddest battles possible versus the last place team feeling like they're a part of the club too. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, absolutely. Oklahoma, it could be Arkansas, Mizzou, and Texas for them. But does that really do anything for Oklahoma fans? I mean,
Oklahoma, Mizzou, I forget Missouri's even in the SEC half the time. I really do. It's not intentional or anything. I just don't think about them all that much, quite frankly. But yeah, Oklahoma, Missouri, that would, they had some good battles in the Big 12 back in the day. I don't know how exciting that is for Oklahoma fans versus the other options because there's 6 other options that are way sexier. But at least there's some history there. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And, look, if I'm a Florida fan, I want LSU. I want Tennessee. And I probably want Auburn. I mean, they're probably going to wind up getting South Carolina in that.
Who
one.
wants Bama?
Yeah. I mean, Auburn and Bama is going to be a
LSU.
thing. Tennessee and Bama is going to be a thing, and LSU and Bama should probably be a thing.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, the best TV thing, because Bama and Tennessee have that cross-conference or cross-divisional rivalry going back forever, and before they had divisions, that was a huge rivalry. So.
I do think it's great, though, that everybody's acknowledging that everything got a little stale. Because I do feel like it did. I do feel like, still no Georgia A&M matchup at this point, right? I mean, all these years they've been in, like Johnny Manziel's like in his 30s now, and they still haven't played each other, which is just ridiculous. So I'm glad that they're shaking it up. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, the first time this doesn't work out where somebody like loses a playoff spot because they did it this way, the complaints that will come. But I think ultimately it'll be a lot more positive than negative. And college football's scheduling definitely needed a little bit of a shakeup. It did feel like we were seeing pretty much the same things over and over and over again. So, I feel like the Big 12 with just the 10 teams actually became a lot more exciting because you didn't avoid anybody and you knew you had to face every single team on the schedule. Now, it's not possible to do that in all these other conferences because there's too many teams, but yeah, moving away from we have to play all of our divisional opponents, so that's why you won't see this team, a few hundred miles away for 7 years before you see them. I'm glad that's going to the wayside. I think that is ridiculous.
Yeah, and look, I think the Big Ten probably has the same kind of problem. We don't think about it as much, but they've got 14 teams, and
they just don't have nearly as many brands that matter to, I think, the general public. Because if the SEC, you can rattle off like 7 of them, and now you include OU and Texas in that. So Florida, Georgia, LSU, Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, Oklahoma. And then the Big Ten, it's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. I guess we'll throw Michigan State in there. I guess we'll throw who. You should throw Nebraska, but they are where they should be.
Iowa,
Wisconsin,
But then you've got Purdue, Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah. There's not if the Big Ten does the same model, I'm sure there's going to be somebody who's stuck with the Rutgers, Northwestern, Purdue 3. That's Indiana. It's not a football school. It's,
Illinois.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's just fine. There's just a lot of teams that are like, okay, fine, yeah, whatever. But, it's really been a 2-horse race and maybe a 4 or 5-horse race. Michigan State with Mel Tucker, and Wisconsin's been super steady. And James Franklin, Penn State, I don't know if they've tapped out or maximized their potential. It kind of feels like that. But, they're still one of the upper echelon brands. But, I think the schedule, like I said, shakeup is good. I'm curious the first time it goes awry and how that occurs, to where – it's not the perfect model moving forward because there's always going to be, nothing's ever going to be totally perfect. But I do think there's going to be a lot more good that comes from it than any negatives that come from it for sure.
Yeah.
And clearly a lot of people are talking about it. That's the thing. If this weren't happening, then I'm sure there would be some college football topic people would be discussing, NIL or something like that. But I think it's been kind of eye-opening to me to see how many people are into schedules. I've never been this into schedules or given it that much thought, but there's clearly a lot of people giving it a lot of thought, and that's great. It's obviously, change is not always necessarily good, but I think in this case it is, and I think if it's creating a lot of conversation that's mostly positive, then that's, good for college football.
Yeah. Razorback MZ23 says Hogs get Texas, OU, and Mizzou. Texas gets Hogs, OU, and A&M. I wonder, that Arkansas is interesting because Texas and Arkansas was a fantastic Southwest Conference rivalry, but that's been 30 years now. So
it's a lot of Southwest Conference fans that love talking about that, and unfortunately, Southwest Conference fans have aged pretty much at this point. To my point being that you got a lot of older fans now who are recalling the glory days of that conference. And dude, I'm pushing 40 and I don't have hardly any recollection of it whatsoever. So do you think somebody that's 23 is like, oh, the old Southwest Conference? No, they have no idea what they're like, Southwest what? The the Big 12's changed 17 times since the Southwest Conference was in existence. So I think for the older fans, there's that heartwarming feeling of, days days gone by and all that, and that some of that will be rekindled. But I think there will be a newness to some of these. That there will be a newness to some of these old rivalries, so to speak, that will be cool and refreshing.
Yeah. If you want like a good example of how younger people feel about the Southwest Conference, try to get somebody in their 20s to watch The Goonies. Like it's a great movie, especially for our generation, Craig and Garrett. It's a great movie. We all love it. It was a great movie when we were kids. We all loved The Goonies. But trying to tell, like Jack and Levi, and I'm sure Emery likes The Goonies. He's cool. But trying to tell them about it, they're like, well, I don't know. I really care about a bunch of kids finding treasure in Oregon. Like, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So it's hard
That's how
to
I feel about Avatar.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like Avatar for a different reason.
I just don't know what the hype's all about. Really quite. I mean, I guess it's technological hype, but outside of that, it's like, okay.
Well, it's a remake of Ferngully.
And Dances with Wolves, right?
Yeah. It's like that intersection right there.
Yeah.
Plus, that tail thing is weird.
I don't know. I just never cared about it at all. And like the announcement that the sequels are finally coming out, I see all this, pandemonium over it or excitement. I'm just like, do not care at all. It never registered with me, never made a dent in my brain as far as like, oh, wow, look at the special effects and all of that. But I don't know why I'm randomly slandering Avatar. But yeah, just some things that some people appreciate that others don't. It's a passing of time and just different generations. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be cool for the older fans, like I said, to see Texas and Arkansas, even though they've played since then, a few times. But to see it on a year in, year out basis, and to not only see that, but also see A&M and also see Oklahoma now, I think that's going to be really cool. And we'll bring, some new chapters to these old stories and legends that Grandpa, Dad, and whoever have been talking about for all these years. They'll finally get to see some of, what the Southwest Conference meant just in a different arena.
Yeah, and let's see. Brandon Reese says Sports Illustrated had Florida and OU as each other's permanent opponents. I kind of like that. That would be, plus it forces a permanent opponent across regions of the country in a wide spanning conference, which I like.
Well, I mean, there's two ways to do it. You can go the very easy route of what's comfortable and familiar, and OU, Arkansas, OU, Missouri, OU, Texas, that makes just very easy, simple sense. But yeah, if you want to, shake it up and spice things up and not worry so much about the Southwest Conference, nod, then yeah, I'd be all for. I'm up for whatever. Like, I have grown up an Oklahoma fan. If they ended up saying Florida, LSU, Bama, like that would suck for them as a team. Yeah. But man, it would be exciting at least initially. But I'm not locked into they got to play the teams that they already have a relationship with. Basically, the last time Florida and Oklahoma faced off, Urban Meyer's crew took it out on them. Aaron Hernandez and Tebow and Percy Harvin and Brandon Spikes and all those cats took it out on OU in the national championship game. And that's the last time they've met. So I think that would be a cool, unique, and fresh new. Like, that's what I'm saying is, are they trying to go all let's dip into the history here and preserve that? Or do we want to actually use this opportunity to create some new history? And with Oklahoma, Florida, yeah, I think you would do that. I'd be all on board. I'd be on board OU, Tennessee, because when they played a few years ago, I think that series worked out in Oklahoma's favor. They won both those games. But, I mean, just the feel of it was pretty cool too. So, yeah, I'd be all on board for OU.